Yeah, our first talk tonight. It's great to have James Canton here because he's written a number of books that have really moved me over time. The Oak Papers, I think, was the first book that I found, and it really spoke to me about oak trees in a way that felt very familiar, but it was such a beautiful story. So I got really into that, and then Grounded, exploring ancient sites, looking at ancient sites through sort of modern ancestors and people that he was very close to, and what that looked like during a time of sort of upheaval in the world that we're not quite over. But then this new book is such an inspiring book. I think when I first read it, I thought it was such an interesting idea that someone wanted to create something like NEP, but for someone that didn't own anything like NEP. And what can you do if you can't rewild on that scale? How can you make a contribution? How can you change things? And so I was really pleased when James said he'd come along this evening and talk about his latest book, Renaturing. And that's what we're going to spend a little time on now. And so it's a great pleasure to introduce James Canton, everybody.
Hello. Hello, Stone Club. Yeah, thank you, Matthew. Matthew's nice, isn't he? Do you know what I mean? He's sort of in charge, but he's actually quite a nice guy as well. He's sort of in charge. Thank you. I think we're good. So, yeah, I hope you settled in. It's quite unnerving not being able to see the back of your audience. So I hope there's no one heckling down there, but there's some sort of people sort of waving, which I think is probably a good sign. Yeah. So look, Stone Club is about stones. This is about living things, okay? But I do stones. The last book was very stones based, so just to let you know, kind of. Thank you, Matthew. We good? So I'm just being lazy so that I can sit. So just talking into this book a little bit. I normally have to say this as a kind of confessional, but what's really nice is I'm in London, so I don't have to do this as a confessional. So my normal confession is, if you're in sort of nature and sort of bringing back the natural world, you're meant to have been brought up in kind of some country estate, ideally. That's the kind of ideal at Apex. I was brought up in suburban West London, in a sort of unfashionable side of Ealing, and so my story is that about 25 years ago now, I kind of finally thought I should live in somewhere that's not a city, and so I eventually managed to get myself out to the rural, wilder parts of Essex, and was looking around with my partner for a place that we could afford to buy, and found this place, which was quite cool. So you're getting a bit of a personal tour as well as a kind of book tour. I think it's always good to show the person. So this was a kind of shabby, rundown farm labourer's cottage that I've recently seen described as tenements rather than cottages, which is an important distinction to Victorians. But for me, it was like perfect. And the problem that I had was when we went to look round it, what I was initially attracted by is when I went around the back of the house. You'll like this bit. There was an old lane down there, and I thought that looks like a green lane. And then which it is, it's pre-Roman green lane. And then beyond the lane, there was a little sign with a gate, and it said for sale. And behind the sign and the gate was a 2-acre field. So obviously, if you come from London and you think, hold on, I'm moving to the countryside, we could buy a field. And you know, like it was back in the day, it was in the year 2000, and you could buy a field pretty cheaply. Certainly I was basically just added it to the mortgage, and it didn't make any difference. The only trouble was, I was from London, so it was like, got this field, and then I was like, what do you do with a field? You know, like 2 acres is quite big. I mean, like we could all happily dance around in a 2-acre plot rather than being all squeezed in like this. So what did I do? I got all my mates from London, and they came out once a year, and we just had a kind of sort of cricket match. That looks kind of quite folky, I would suggest, that image there of us sort of standing around in a field. But that was essentially what I did with this field, in that I didn't I kind of didn't have that sensibility of like thinking anything kind of for like rational to do with it. So I just thought we'll have a party. So we would have a party, and for about 10 years or so, that was all I did, was I just mowed this field. And it's kind of relentless. If you need to keep that grass down, there's not a lot else you can do. So you have to kind of keep mowing it down. Every kind of couple of weeks, on a sit-on mower that was built for golf courses, like nice smooth golf courses. Instead I had this like raggedy old field that used to have horses on it. And when I first went to it in May, the grass was kind of up here, and I'd managed to persuade someone to kind of come and cut it down, because I didn't know how you did it, some bloke with a tractor kind of thing. So anyway, so I was very much kind of not in my element, but really enjoying myself, you know, just kind of hanging out there in a field. And so gradually I kind of started moving on from this, and thought about 10 years ago I started taking it more seriously, the idea of actually maybe trying to help things regrow in this field, rather than what now people would call kind of green concrete, you know, that kind of idea that you might have a bit of like what looks like nice bit of parkland. There's not a lot growing there. That's the reality. And I started becoming friends with a good naturalist. And what I'd started to do was what I was thinking I was doing was I started to just leave patches to just do their own thing. So I started to leave the edges, so I didn't have to mow so much of it. And the jays would just move the acorns, stick them in the ground, and they would turn into oak trees. And quite quickly I had this kind of boundary of oak trees. And I was kind of excited on this project. And as I say, I got a naturalist friend of mine, Chris Gibson, over, and kind of did that thing that you can do sometimes, where you get an expert over, and then you try and start to explain to them what you're doing, even though that they are a much better expert in what you're trying to explain to them. So I started trying to explain to Chris Gibson what I was doing with this field. I'd started to kind of like cut back certain sort of the blackthorn growth that I thought, that's no good. I'm going to create wildflower meadows. So I got Chris Gibson over, and he was great. And he said, he was very encouraging. He said, James, you're doing some lovely things here, some lovely, you know, really good. I said, yeah, well, thanks, Chris. You know, this is me. I'm rewilding this field. And he said, well, that's great, James. You're doing some lovely stuff here. You know, I love the way you're cutting back a bit of bramble there, and you've vaguely kind of done something here with this blackthorn. And he said, but it's not rewilding. He said, you need a minimum of 1,000 acres to do rewilding, James. You've got 2 acres. What this is renaturing. Okay, so I was like, oh, okay, thanks very much, Chris. Something. And then he basically became my guru over there, and he still is my kind of go-to guru over the next few years. So this is a kind of like educative journey that the book is about, both. So it's a personal journey. You get a little bit of hearing about me and moving into this field, and you know, this kind of thing. But it's very much also, the idea of it is kind of my journey of discovery, of sort of stepping out and meeting up with experts who are also on this journey of nature restoration. But look, one of the key big points about this was this idea. And so this is your educative slide. There are not any others. You can just shut your eyes if you're just like, it's a Tuesday night out or whatever we're on, and I just don't want to do that. But it's a Monday night even. But so this is the education bit, all right? This is it. So you don't have to worry any beyond this. But I think it's an important point, because everyone says, well, what's renaturing? Why isn't it just rewilding? Because, you know, with the term rewilding now is one of those terms that it's a plastic term. Yeah, so it gets used for everything from what it was first invented for in the early 90s by ecologists to describe large-scale nature restoration of over 1,000 acres. But now it gets used for like rewild your life. You know, rewild your hair by not washing it for a couple of weeks, and it will be rewilded. You know, and this is, you know, it's fine. I mean, it really is fine in that sense. But if it makes us all slightly wilder, maybe. But it does slightly diminish the original term, which was this idea of large-scale nature restoration where humans weren't involved in there, and you kind of let the natural processes take place, as I learned in my efforts to get bigger. So the problem, in a way, with rewilding, it works fine if you've got thousands and thousands of acres, but if you haven't, how are you involved in this? You know, so let's just do it. This is London, like London's our capital, it's wealthy, it's got, so let me just try this. I've been trying this in various talks around the country. Okay, could you put your hand up if you have 1,000 acres of land that you would like to, that's disappointing. That's disappointing. I did this in Sudbury, my local town, and someone stuck their hand up, you know, so it's like, you know, out in the country, there's people with land. But look, so this is rewilding. Let me show you this. That's rewilding, okay? That, for Londoners, that's a wolf. All right, it's not a fox, that is a wolf. If one of those is bowling past you in South London, okay, get worried. So that's actually a wolf from Yellowstone Park. I don't know if anyone's been there, I still haven't been there, but that is proper rewilding. 2.2 million acres. Okay, Trump's doing his best to destroy it, but it is still there. 2.2 million acres, 64 miles north-south, 53 east-west, something like that. This massive area that since the mid-90s they've reintroduced wolves to. All the wolves have been shot, unfortunately, in the 1920s and so. They reintroduced wolves. This is kind of these same sort of gang that were introducing the term rewilding. And they kind of then sort of slightly sat back and watched, and they thought, this will take a while. This is going to take a while before you start getting what they call trophic cascades, where you start having these amazing kind of like natural processes where more and more living things are evolving in this ecosystem. They introduced the wolves. Really quickly, the deer that have been this massive problem because they would just stand around munching everything down to nothing. The deer, funnily enough, could smell the wolves. So what do you do if you're a deer and you smell a wolf? You walk away from the smell. So quite quickly, the deer started shifting their patterns. So the ecologists watching this were genuinely quite amazed that it happened so quickly. And once the deer started moving, they didn't graze everything down, they didn't start munching the willow down to nothing. So you started having willow trees coming, you started having beavers coming in, changing the entire landscape really quite quickly. So that's rewilding. If you're uncertain as to what rewilding is, that's rewilding. So I was like, okay, so what happens if I was still living in London and I wanted to be involved in nature restoration, like in Britain, yeah, in the British context? So I started thinking about, you know, obviously I was lucky I had this 2-acre field and I'm doing all this work, but what if I'm still in London? So I was thinking of this building. Now you people, but I have to explain this building to lots of people outside of London. Now I know you intelligent, you know, architecture students in here are going to go, oh yes, I know that building. That's Trellick Tower, 1972. It's a iconic, I think is the term we always use to describe this. But I was thinking, well, what about something like that? You know, how can you be involved in nature restoration if you're from London? And I've actually got a mate that lives about 3 floors from the top in this. So I was thinking about him, not that he's going to do any nature restoration at all, to be honest with you. But so this iconic building, Trellick Tower, has 217 flats, beautifully designed. They're all partially south-facing. So it's really clever, you know, it's a clever idea. And I thought, okay, I got my little calculator out, but I've got a pencil actually, I did get a pencil out. But if you put like 5 to 10 window boxes in each of those balconies, like what happens? Say you put wildflowers in each of those window boxes, that adds up to 4 acres of wildflower meadow in a tower block in West London. So it's this idea that I was thinking, yeah, that's brilliant. Plus, you have 217 flat occupants that are engaged in nature restoration. And that's really one of the big problems with rewilding is like, how do you get humans involved in this, you know? So in an urban context, it's quite possible to be doing this renaturing. I don't know if anyone's been to see this in the flesh. This is in Milan. It's known as the vertical forest. So again, just a really nice other example of the way in which you could be engaged actively as an individual in nature restoration kind of thing. And I was thinking, well, yeah, this is great. And so what I started doing was talking to experts. So I started speaking to like a rewilding expert, a guy called Steve Carver, who started to explain to me the problem with the British context of rewilding. So, you know, we've seen Yellowstone, 2.2 million acres, stick a few more wolves in there, it all kind of works itself out. If you think, what's the problem with that? I've got my little 2-acre plot that I'm doing renaturing. I can't stick 2 wolves on there, can I? It's going to cause chaos in North Essex. So how do we do rewilding in Britain? Well, as Steve Carver said, he describes it as the country estate rewilding model, because the only people that have got enough land to do anything like rewilding are the gentry, are the country estate holders in Britain. So, you know, Britain and England in particular have these kind of weird dynamics. So 50% of the land in England is owned by less than 1% of the people. And I was saying this to someone from Scotland the other day, and they said, yeah, and in Scotland, there's this crazy stat, I haven't checked it out yet, but something like 20 people own something like 20% of Scotland. So we have this kind of like really weird land ownership model, which you could in some way work to your advantage in terms of this idea of being big scale rewilding. But the problem is, how do you get people involved? And so that's where kind of renaturing comes in, if you like. So anyway, look, I'll show you some pretty pictures as a made up for doing all that kind of intellectual hard work kind of thing. So look, this is me in the field. Well, not me, but this is my scale of what I will call rewilding. This is like getting like these guys back. So it's been a good year for these. Anyone know what that is? Someone's gonna know. Yes. It's not, but it's a good shout, and thank you for putting your hand up. This is like a nature quiz now, isn't it? I just turned it into a nature quiz. That's what I wanted to do, basically. But this is actually a cinnabar moth caterpillar, okay, growing on that thing called ragwort, which a lot of people, again, so this was me learning about this stuff. A lot of people in the country, they pull it up. So if a lot of farmers go, oh, blimey, look at that ragwort. Yeah, that kills horses. That kills horses, that does. And it's a poisonous plant. But it's also home to something like 230 different invertebrates like to hang around on it, and something like 30 are entirely dependent upon it. Isn't that crazy? And yet, because it can kill horses if you mash it up and put it into hay and feed it to horses, I mean, weirdly enough, if you leave it on the ground, the horses don't eat it. Do you know what I mean? So it's just like all these myths about you know, the country world. And obviously as a Londoner, I just bowled in there and kind of went, no, it doesn't, you know, sort of thing. So this is more what you want to see. This is me getting involved in the country ways, renaturing. I've got my scythe going. So again, this is one of the questions I've been doing on the renaturing tour around the country. So London, could you put your hand in the air if you've ever used a scythe? Oh, thank you. You have not let me down. There, oh yeah, a couple over there. Okay, that's thank you. That's really reassuring, actually. So, the thing I found about using the scythe is, one, it's just hilarious fun, because if anyone sees you walking along with it, you know, one, they're slightly terrified, but they'll obviously also have to say, you know, that some sort of death joke. So that's good. But it's also, I found it like incredibly meditative. And it's just a really nice way of cutting your wildflower meadows once you've kind of grown them. This tool, on the other hand, is really intriguing. So I just found it in the shed, and so I have no name for it. So if you have one at home in London, probably hand it into the police, I'd say. But you know, so this is my scarifying tool. So again, you find me out in the field, or I'll give it a couple of months, I will be out there scything away, and then when I've scythed my sections down, I get this tool out, and I have to pretend that I am an ancient auroch of some kind, some prehistoric animal, with hooves like this, sort of gnawing at the ground in some way. So yeah, this is me. I'll just show you some nicer, pretty pictures. Taken by Maddie down here, actually. These are not taken by me. So this is one of the key things. Again, it was a really fun thing, like a sort of like a city kid learning about the country ways, and this was sort of part of the journey. So this is known as the meadow maker. This is yellow rattle. So any one of you with a little bit of ground that is trying to make a meadow, you want to make friends with this. So what I would do, as soon as I got it going, collect the seed, then next year put it back down again, scarify with my little scarifier, get it down on the new opened ground, and then it opens the ground up. Basically, it parasitizes grass. And if like me, you've got like a really raggedy old bit of land that just used to have horses on it. It actually mine used to be a scrap merchant was there, apparently a bit before me as well. So it's not great ground. It's got very high nitrogen levels, etc. So what you're trying to do all the time is knock the grasses down in order to create wildflower meadows. And then once you do, you get to take pretty pictures of things like this with great names. This is fleabane. So if you've got fleas, go get yourself some fleabane. It's brilliant. This is like the meadows in their full bloom with their full cornfield colour, and then later in the year, and then what you also get to do is you get to make friends with things like this. Does anyone know what that beetle is? Should we continue the nature quiz? Oh, I'd be so impressed. My naturalist friend Chris Gibson. Oh, we've got. She's going again.
I'm going again. It's probably wrong. It's a cardinal beetle, but I'm not quite sure which one.
I can give you the Latin because I've got it written down here, but it's it's a good shout. I'd love to say yes. Let's just say yes. No, it's a soldier beetle apparently, but it's known as a hogweed bonking beetle. Isn't that cool? A rare shot of it on its own. There you go. I thought that was lovely. And if I don't know if you've ever met any bee people, but they can get really like into bees. I won't say who we met at Charleston last weekend, but like if you just search him on bees are brilliant. Okay, so does anyone know what this bee is? Go on, Jackie. You know, that's what I said actually, but it's not. It's an early bumblebee, Bombus pretorum, on field scabious. Do you want the Latin? Now this is from Chris Gibson. I love naturalists because I don't have that training. So it's great to have these people, isn't it? So fortunately, whenever I take a photo of something I don't know about, just ping them across on WhatsApp. So yeah, and then you get really cute things like this. Isn't that cool? A little hoverfly, little baby hoverflies just come out. I don't think that's scientific technology there, but and then these amazing things that turn up in your field all the time. These are plant bugs, specifically for you. So it's just that idea of like, all over, like, okay, we've had a really good year this year for like wildflowers and bugs and beetles because we've had no rain and it didn't chuck it down in April and be freezing cold. But it's just this idea that wildflowers, even in the urban context, with individuals getting involved in this, it can be such an amazing thing to do. And I guarantee, so I've got this little box at home that I call a mini meadow. So it's literally a window box about this big that I've planted with meadow things. All right, so it's got yellow rattle in there, it's got cornfield annuals and stuff like that. And I was, just because of that idea that I'm sort of living a parallel life, to say I was living in a flat in London, how would I be involved in wildflowers? And you can do it. There's so many ways now of getting really good local seed, even in London, and just turning, your balcony into a wildflower meadow. I just think that's such a cool idea. So this was part of the journey of the book, because I was like, well, what if I was in London, I've got this 2-acre field that I used to just play cricket on with my mates, and now I've seen the light. It's all about increasing biodiversity on this earth because, the humans are taking over. So we're kind of working against that narrative. And then I'd also learned this thing about, but in England, it's really tricky because the only people that can do this are the gentry, and then, which is fine, and there's lots of really good people that are trying good things. And I thought, well, okay, what I do need to do in the book is I need to go and meet someone who is the gentry and is doing this thing. So I got in touch with my local gentry, and he was really nice. There were a few to choose from out in rural East Anglia, to be honest with you, all absolutely lovely, with some fabulous names. Like really, really good names. So the best, but I haven't managed to meet him yet, but everyone says he's really nice. He's called Argus Gaythorne Hardy. Okay, so that's a good gentry name. The guy that I got to meet, who was really nice, was called Lord. I don't think that's officially his first name. Lord Somerleyton. Okay, so I got in touch with this guy because they're good people. Like they set up this organisation called Wild East, about pledging 20% of whatever land you've got. This was, so when I first met him, first things he said, yeah, it was all about democratising rewilding. I was like, yeah, good on you, mate. You know, I mean, so this idea of 20%, so say you're in a suburban garden, you 20% you just leave to the nettles, maybe put some wildflower seed down. Say you live as Lord Somerleyton does in that hall, okay, and you have 5,500 acres, all right? He's pledged, I mean, and he really has, over 1,000 acres to this big rewilding just about project. There's no apex predators on there, there's no wolves, just in case you want to go and have a look at a wolf. But it was really funny. So so this was part of the journey of the book. I was like, I must go and see people of you know, stature who've got big bits of land that they're doing good things on. Because in Britain, one of the problems is you know, who owns the land, as we know, sort of thing. So it's this thing of, you know, there's lots of debates about access rights at the moment, even to the stones. You know, this is a big issue. So I went to meet Hugh Somerleyton, and he genuinely was really, really good. But I went around. This is the back of the house. I didn't know this. For any of you that, if you get invited around to a hall, all right, don't go to the front because you won't be able to get in. You have to go around the back. That's the only way you can get in, as I learned. So I went in around the back, and I walked into the entrance hall, and that's what I met, which was a full-sized stuffed polar bear, behind which was, I think it's a white tiger's skin. And I just kind of was like, so, you know, and I didn't go, I just met him. I couldn't go to the conversation of, I really think the optics are bad on this in terms of the rewilding, you know, when you get your, you know, but obviously the tourists don't come around that way. So, and he was doing really good things. He really was doing really good things. And one of the things he really got me thinking about was this idea of water. And he'd actually even brought in water buffaloes. So on his land, he had these water buffaloes. He doesn't need little scarifying things like this, does he? Scraping away at the ground like that. He has these animals doing it for him, opening it all up. But what he really got me into this idea, I had 2 acres and I didn't have any water on it. Like, you know, it's high ground in Essex, like clay, you know, and I thought, right, I must start doing it. So I started digging a pond. Okay, so that was at that point. I then went off and started looking at other projects. This idea, I mean, you know, it's boiling hot, yeah? It's not about to get, I don't think the climate's about to change immediately, so we need to start thinking about this. So one of the things I did was I went off on this project to see locally, near to me, where there've been, you know, you could call it a sort of renaturing project, effectively. And this place that I went to, I'll show you a little clue. Do you know what I went to visit from that? Thank you very much, someone down the front. So this was a small village, well, this is near a small village in Essex that I went to. It's called Finchingfield. And I went there in 2022 in the summer, and we just recorded in England the highest recorded temperature. It's just been 40.1 degrees or something. And I went the day after to this site to see these 2 beavers that have been introduced in 2019. And this was a village that used to get flooded every time. It was a really beautiful, picturesque village, you know, with a lovely village green. Every time it rained in the summer, it just poured down the stream and then flooded the village. And they'd introduced these 2 beavers,
and had entirely changed the landscape. And I went there, as I say, and it looked like this. It was this beautiful sort of watery glade. So I thought, right, this is something I've got to do. I mean, I know I've been planting wildflower meadows, and this is all very good, and I've been like digging up this and doing like Chris Gibson's telling me to, creating these little pockets of biodiverse land on the 2 acres. But I hadn't done anything else. I hadn't done much in terms of like creating some structural change. So I thought, right, I'm going to build a pond, and as I say, I'd started digging it myself, but both knees had gone by then. They really couldn't cope with the clay. So I got in touch. I spoke to a local mate of mine, Mike, and I said, Mike, okay, look, Mike, who do I need? I need to dig a pond in the field, yeah? Who are you going to recommend? He grew up around there, do you know what I mean? So I turned to Mike about all these issues. And he said, okay, you got 2 choices, I reckon. This is by text, you know, that kind of. He's like, Mad Mark or Digger Dave. So I was like, Mad Mark, you know what he's like. We were like, yeah, maybe not Mad Mark for this one. So I rang up Digger Dave, and good old Digger Dave. I spoke to him on the phone. He agreed to come over. He brought his lovely 3-ton orange digger. You can see my effort just to the side. That was about 2 years of work. Kind of like just every hour I had spare, kind of casually digging away. Digger Dave came over. He kind of looked at the ground. He is if anyone is in the North Essex region and needs a pond making, Digger Dave's your man. I can absolutely guarantee that. Mad Mark, he could be fine, but I would go Digger Dave personally. In one little half day, he's stuck on Radio Caroline, and he was off. Okay, and so the thing for you non-pond diggers, there's probably a couple of you out there, what the key thing when you're working on a big pond is how you puddle it, okay? Which is basically how you create a natural liner. Now I had clay, and we looked at this clay, he dug it out, and was like, yeah, I think it's gonna be all right. It's a bit loamy in places, but I think it's gonna work. This was the pond a few months later. So it's like, it doesn't look like that now, I should add, but it's 10 meters by about 4 meters, and it was amazing. It just transforms. One of the best things that you can do, even if you're in a balcony. This is what I've learned. Or if you've got, ideally, if you've got a small garden, ponds work better on small gardens. But if you've got any kind of garden space, make a pond. It's like you will not regret it. And the great thing was this is, so Digger Dave came in and he created this enormous hole in the ground, sort of shoved the clay around, you know, beautifully done, absolutely perfectly done, perfect slope, as he said, you know, perfect slope to let all your frogs and newts walk out. And, you know, so there's a big hole in the field. That night, it rained a little bit. Next morning, obviously I'm out there looking at the hole in the field. There's a tiny little puddle in there. There's 2 pond skaters already sitting on there. Do you know what I mean? It's like, if you create the habitat, the life comes. And I did just sort of like look at these 2 pond skaters, and it was a bit like they looked at me and they kind of went, we've been waiting here for 10 years for you to make this bloody hole in the ground, sort of thing. So it was very good. It was very good, and it worked out beautifully. So this was sort of the last action in the field, if you like, the last on this sort of journey of renaturing. And what I really liked was when I was speaking to Digger Dave, I thought, oh, it's been a while since I spoke to him, but I said, like, so Dave, yeah, come over. Do you know where I live? And I started explaining, and he went, no, I know where you live. I came over there like years and years ago, and I suddenly realised I'd met him at a parents' evening when I was a secondary school teacher, when I'd first turned up there, when I just bought the field. He was the guy, even though I should have been sitting there talking about English literature and his elder daughter, Tiffany, and how she was getting on in her GCSEs. Instead, we were talking about the field and how the hell I was going to cut this grass down. And he'd been the guy that had said, I'll come over and top it. So Digger Dave had actually saved me right at the beginning of this journey. And then actually Digger Dave was the last person to come and do some work on there. So partly this book is all about that journey into renaturing that I took, and if you like, partly it's all about the journey into renaturing that we can all take to make the world a little bit wilder. Thank you.
James. Well, I mean, of course, we have copies of this book here at the back, at the very, very back, that we'll do on an interval after we've chatted with Lally. But I thought also it'd be really, I mean, as well as Renaturing, I thought it would just be really great to visit some of the other areas that you've also written about. I mentioned the Oak Papers and Grounded before, and I guess there's this Stone Club, and it's a Monday night at the Social.
Yeah.
Maybe we should talk about that a little bit as well. If you could just describe, some people might have read it, but for those who haven't, the premise of Grounded.
Yeah, there's two books really that I've really written that are, you know, much more kind of hardcore Stone Club gang. So Grounded was the book that I wrote before this, and it's essentially a journey into sort of, well, I was searching for the term, and I did use the term sacred in the end, but you know, in a kind of Ronald Hutton sacred spaces type way, if you know what I mean. So that idea of kind of seeking the sacred on the landscape. So a lot of it was written during lockdown, and it was that fascinating thing that I'd started the book thinking I'm going to go all over the British Isles, going to like the most sacred places around Britain, which was a kind of fairly naff idea. And what was much more interesting was doing that on your local landscape and doing things like, so for example, like one of the things quickly, like in a little village where this is all going on, there's a 1,000-year-old church, and everyone really likes it because it's one of 4 round churches in England that are still functioning. So it's pretty cool, yeah. But it's basically only 1,000 years old, and before that, the land was not a sacred place. Whereas up the road at the unfashionable Great Maplestead Church that no one bothers to go and look at, that land, I know there was a Bronze Age burial site right there, and probably it's perfect. It's on a hill, lovely view over. Do you know what I mean? So it's got all those markers. So it's kind of it was a book that was about that. It was about exploring the sacred in the sense of like the non-obvious sacred, if you like. I mean, I did also go to West Kennet, of course, as soon as we were allowed out after lockdown, kind of thing. So yeah.
Well, it's full of incredible illustrations right throughout the book, and
yeah.
You know, sometimes you bring them with you when you do things, and they're amazing illustrations. But it's not a dissimilar book to, on our website we have this Your Stones section where people Stone Club members send photographs and recollections or field notes or just, you know, whatever, jottings about a place. And in a way you're sort of doing that through it, but it's also during that time where you have to keep a large distance away from friends, and then it's a great place to meet up, and it's very much where I suppose Stone Club was founded from as well, that same idea of meeting the same people.
Same time, wasn't it? Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and it was, and I started just going on this journey sort of back and back through time as much as anything in the British context, you know. So it's all very well, but once you're at West Kennet and you're with those first farmers that are kind of marking this space on the landscape, and I started getting really intrigued, and I'm still like, this is what I'm really writing a lot about at the moment, is what if you go further back, you know, because the narrative just says, oh, well, we were hunter-gatherers, you know, we were hunter-gatherers before that, and therefore obviously we didn't have any sacred places on the landscape, and that's just not right, is it? It's just because they're not there in large lumps of stone doesn't mean there weren't sacred places. So it's kind of a journey into that kind of much harder to nail down landscape of the sacred for those people pre-farming, for the Mesolithic, you know, what's going on there. And I find that really intriguing. I still find that a really intriguing narrative to try and explore.
And it's a very personal narrative as well, but at the same time you're exploring these very universal themes throughout the book. Yeah. You know, you really are sort of like travelling back through time, but you're also wondering what's coming next at a time when humanity's wondering what's coming next. And we still are, you know, there's still this continuous daily unfortunate situation where we don't quite know, we haven't settled, things are not easy. And so you're exploring some of those things, but you're looking right the way back, and you know, how did that occur? Was that something from the very beginning you thought, I need to look all the way back there to try and figure out where I'm going?
You know, it evolved as the journey went on. So I'd written, for the people who are really into this, I'd written a book back in it was published in 2017 with Collins, called Ancient Wanderings, which was this journey much more a kind of traditional actual journey around the country, going to various places and kind of going on various adventures into aspects of kind of prehistory. So like, for example, I'd gone and camped out
Has anyone been to South Uist? Does anyone know South Uist out in the right? Okay, so it's amazing. It's just so you go up Scotland, then you get a boat for like 5 hours out to the Outer Hebrides. But this was a kind of journey into prehistory that I realise now kind of prefigured a lot of what I was doing in Grounded. So each chapter was a kind of a different journey, if you like. And so one of these things in Ancient Wanderings that I think particularly worthwhile if you get the chance, South Uist, I just went to this Bronze Age site called Cladhallen, which you might not know that much about, except that was the site where they discovered that the Bronze Age were making mummies. They were mummifying their dead. And it's just this incredible story. I won't tell everything about the story. You can go and buy Ancient Wanderings and follow the journey yourself. But this idea of kind of going into, and I'm sure you guys in Stone Club, this is what you do. You kind of go into these kind of moments in the past, and then kind of just try and imagine what it would have been like being there, kind of thing. So there was a lot of that, and Grounded was about that.
But at the same time, we really wanted you to come here tonight to talk about renaturing as well, because I think one of the things, I mean, if you join Stone Club, for those of you that have joined, you get a letter that Lally and I wrote, and it describes all the sort of different ancient sites that you might see on your way, although we chose stone as the name. And I think whether it's renaturing and trying to look at that sort of like nature restoration, or whether it's, I suppose, looking at the 99% canopy cover that Cornwall used to have, for example, when it was temperate Atlantic rainforest. These, restoring to some degree ancient landscapes in Britain is really important to us, I think, or looking at what that future might look like. Because in the same way as megalith builders, you're going to have to look generations into the future before that'll ever be achieved. And I think that's a really beautiful thing that humanity can do and has done, but is maybe a bit short-sighted on at this moment in time. And I think that's why it's also really important to include these things when we're talking about ancient sites.
I think that's right, Matthew. And so, like, just recently, I was just up in Cumbria, and just went for a walk one day with a couple of friends, and we walked to the source of the River Lune, okay, which is an important river. It's kind of like Celtic, means pure kind of thing. At the site of the springs that form the Lune, there used to be St Helena's, house or whatever there. So again, and so you've got a kind of nice bit of bumpy ground there, and kind of like, oh, that's intriguing. And then I started noting, and I think it's because I had this kind of renaturing sensibility, and I'm trying to get much better at my wildflowers. Growing all around that area was this amazing collection of medicinal herbs, and you kind of, that is no coincidence. The St John's wort was not growing in massive clumps in other bits nearby. And again, so through the landscape, we get to know the past. And it can be literally through just the living plants that are still existing on that landscape. So yeah, it as you say, it's there. It doesn't have to just be the stones, obviously. They can be something that drags your eye there, but then learning more and more about the mosaic of that landscape around is fascinating, I think.
Well, thank you, James, for talking about all of this tonight. I know that we're definitely going to invite you back, because I also know what's coming next, but we shouldn't tease that yet. We should just let people to follow you on Instagram or something and find out where we're going. But yeah, I think we've got books by James and Lally and Tamsin and Jackie, and they'll be at the back. We're going to talk to Lally next, and then we'll have a break, so there's a good chance to get some books signed. But for now, thank you so much to James Canton.
Thank you, Andy.